Hi, this is Harriet Grayson, your host and the producer of Community Culture Showcase, where we bring you all those wonderful, interesting tidbits about our wonderful coastal communities. And today I have as my guest, who has been my repeat guest, from Save the Bay, my favorite, David Prescott, who's going to talk to us about all the things happening that you may or may not be aware of, and to press us as citizens to get involved in our communities, to kind of not only save the bay, but save our whole environment, and particularly our coast. So welcome, David.
Thank you, Harriet. Thank you.
So we were just chit-chatting. David had been my guest on our documentary,
Yes,
which is
yep.
about the Misquamica Beach, its destruction
Yep.
after Storm Sandy and its rebuilding.
Yep.
And one of the overarching questions, of course, is we live in a world, particularly by the coast, about climate change, and what should we be doing, or at least the citizens, what should we know? So I know you're heavily involved in this whole issue. So first tell us a little bit about Save the Bay.
Sure. Save the Bay, we are an environmental organization in Rhode Island. We have been around since 1970. We focus not only on Narragansett Bay, which is basically the region's most important estuary, but also the watershed and also the South Coast. So as the South County Coastkeeper, I deal with environmental issues around the South Coast of the state, basically stretching from the Connecticut border to the Mass border. I do most of my work around in this area down in Little Narragansett Bay, between Stonington, westerly, and in the southern region too. So. Yeah, our organization, again, has been around for a while. We have really three focuses that we work on. One is advocacy, so advocating for stronger environmental regulations and policy changes. Second one is habitat restoration, so trying to restore our native habitats such as salt marshes and fish runs and eelgrass beds and shellfish beds and whatnot. Over the years, we've done a lot of different things. And then finally is education. So we have a very robust environmental education program where we outreach to somewhere around, I think it's 15,000 or so students a year. And one of our purposes is to really create future stewards, to get our future voters and as students out there on the water to really understand the resource, to understand what lives in there, what's impacting it, how healthy it really is, and so that when they get older and when they can make decisions about the future and whatnot, they can make decisions based upon good knowledge about our resources and why we want to protect them.
That's a wonderful mission, and I know that you do just all kinds of activities. I personally have been involved in you do some boat trips out there into the bay and in the Sound, and you want to tell folks about the stuff that's coming up?
Sure. So we are coming to the part of the year when our winter friends start coming back. I know it's hard to think that winter's right around the corner, but it is true, and we have several marine mammals, specifically seals, that like to come and visit this area. And for the past, for a while now, I don't know exactly how long, 10 years or so, we've been running seal watches aboard our education vessels, where we bring the public and families and kids out on the boat to actually see these animals in the wild in the fall, the winter, and the spring. And we actually run those trips out of 3 different locations. One is out of Westerly, Rhode Island, Newport, and also Fall River, Mass. Fall River we added last year too. So the trips are usually between an hour and a half. Down in this region in Westerly, they're about an hour and a half long. We go down the Pawcatuck River into Little Narragansett Bay and look for seal haul-out sites, which are areas that seals like to rest during low tide, and actually look for several types of seals out on the rocks. It's also a great time to see winter birds, beautiful time to be on the water. There's not a lot of boats out there. It's a totally different perspective. If you're not a boater yourself, it's a totally different perspective of the bay and the river and whatnot, and it's a great opportunity to get out there and to see and get out there in the off season and see some really cool things. So
I have done it last year. I'm definitely going to do it again this year, and I recommend people to do it because it's fun.
It's fun. Yep.
And you have someone who tells us exactly what we're looking at, all the sites that are there, and we do see seals. Sometimes and you see other kinds of stuff who are following the boat.
Yes, yeah.
They pretty much assume that it must be a fishing boat, so there must be some goodies on board.
You never know.
You never know.
And they're curious too.
Yes.
I mean, a lot of the seals that we see are very curious, so they pop up and try to figure out what's going on and whatnot. So, but yeah, those trips are start in Westerly, and the Westerly ones start in early October and run through the end of the year. And then the ones in Newport are basically fall, winter, and spring, and then the Fall River ones are just in the spring. So great opportunity, so no matter where you live, to try to get out there. All of our information is online.
Right.
So you just check out our website, which is www.savebay.org.
Right.
And there'll be a little seal on there. You can click on that, and it'll find out more information about when our trips run and whatnot. So
Right.
a great opportunity to get out there.
And it's usually on Saturdays.
Saturdays, Sundays. It's also, I think in Newport they hold them during school vacation as well. So there's a lot of different options and whatnot. So families in town or something new, it's a great opportunity to get out there. So.
And it's a wonderful opportunity to, as you say, to see this marine life, and also you're not being hassled by a lot of other boaters.
Right.
And in fact, that's why they come around.
Exactly. Yep.
When because there's not that much traffic going around.
Yes.
And most of the sailboats are gone. So it's you, the boat, and Mother Nature.
Yes, yes.
And it's a great opportunity.
Yep.
And that brings me to something we always talk about: climate change. So there was some stuff in the paper, which you're probably familiar with, about the Stonington lobster people. Talking about the decrease in the number of lobsters because the water temperature has gotten too warm.
Yes.
So they're migrating up to Maine, and so they're having just an incredible
banner year up
yes,
there, yeah.
Yes.
And we're
I'll
getting...
be in Maine next month, taking advantage of this. Literally, I will be. So, what is that all about?
Well, I mean,
the big picture and then the little picture.
The big picture is that, yes, things are changing. There's a lot of things changing, and we could talk about all different types of changes, but one of the changes we're definitely seeing is warmer temperatures. This was a banner summer, in terms of going to the beach and whatnot, and I'm sure most of the businesses locally that have
Right.
that work down at the beach had a great year. We just had beautiful weather. It was comfortable. The water temperature was extremely warm and nice. I mean, I was just in the other day, and it was still I think it was in the upper 60s, but this summer I think it hit 74 down in Mesquamaket. So I mean, really warm temperatures. So that's really good for us,
Right.
who really in this state and in this region are dealing with big changes in water temperature, where in the wintertime it gets down in the lower 40s, sometimes upper 30s, and it gets up to, high 60s, low 70s if we're lucky. So it's quite a large range. So anytime you can have really nice warm weather, you're going to have busy beaches, and especially with no big storms or anything like that. But how that does impact is the fact that those animals, which are more cold water animals, such as lobsters, are going to move away, and that's exactly what we're seeing. Is that with warmer temperatures, we're seeing changes in the fish species and the crab species and whatnot that we're either getting more in here, they're either coming in because it's getting much warmer down south and they're moving north, or they're moving out of here. So lobsters are moving out. The last couple of years we've had a lot of blue crabs. Blue crabs are when you think of blue crabs, you think of Chesapeake Bay. There's been studies over the year that say in the next 15, 20, 30 years, we're going to have a climate more closely related to Chesapeake Bay.
Wow.
Well, if that's the case, does that mean more blue crabs? There's a lot of questions about how things are going to change, and they are seeing that. The state and URI have some very old trawl data where they go out and collect animals, and they've been seeing, if you look at their data, you've been seeing changes in species over the years and whatnot, just in terms of more warmer water species, and the colder water ones, again, like the lobsters, are moving north, and Canada and Maine are having banner years up there for lobsters.
Right.
So it's, and then the other thing too is that lobsters down here have been impacted by the shell rot disease and stuff, and that's hit the population pretty hard too as well. So there's a lot of things that are playing into this, but definitely warmer temperatures can cause a lot of, again, positive for those of us who like the water in the summertime, negative not so much for the animals that actually want the colder water. So
are we going to be seeing sharks in Cape Cod?
Well, we are. I mean, we're definitely seeing that, and part of that is the fact too is that. That's another interesting one too, is the fact that we have our seal population has really grown since the passage of the Marine Mammal Protection Act, And guess who likes to eat seals? Sharks.
Sharks.
Do. So, I know there's a lot of people that are really worried about the sharks in the water, but they're a natural predator of seals. So you put more prey out there for them, it's going to bring more sharks in there. So, and that's basically what we're seeing in a lot of cases. So, yeah, there's a lot of changes going on just within the water. Never mind what's happening along the coast and whatnot. So.
And the other big issue, of course, for people who live literally on the coast is this whole issue of the fact that climate change has resulted in fact, erosion.
Yep.
And the water getting higher and higher. So, we can talk about that as well.
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely, sea level rise is one thing that we've been monitoring it for a long time. I say we, I mean the state and the agencies and whatnot within the state for a long time. We've seen approximately about 11 inches of sea level rise in the state of Rhode Island over the past 100 years. I mean, Newport has one of the oldest tide gauges in the country. And then if you look at the predictions of even the new predictions that have come out, we're looking at, right now the newest predictions are showing that by the year 2050, we could have an additional foot or 2 feet of sea level rise. So that's in 35 years. That's a significant amount of water.
Right.
And then by 2100, where we won't be alive, but my kids hopefully will still be, we're looking at potentially up to 4 to 7 feet. That is a significant amount of water for really a region that relies heavily on the coast and lives and works right along the coast there. So how is that going to change? And that's the big question right now. So a lot of it is we need to start making decisions now and try to be as proactive as possible when making decisions along the coast. And that's hard. That's hard. It's an economic. There's an economic issue part of it. There's it's a personal issue. A lot of homeowners or business people who have had businesses and homes along the water for decades plus, generations of families and whatnot, and they're coming to terms with hard decisions about whether or not it's worth it to continue to keep trying to rebuild your home or shore up your shoreline or whatnot, and or whatever that means, whether it's rebuilding the dune or whatnot. But these are really hard decisions that communities have to make, and one of the positive things, is that the state has embarked on a process a couple of years ago known as
the state of Rhode Island.
State of Rhode Island, yep. Known as the Shoreline Change SAMP. SAMP stands for Special Area Management Plan. It's also known as the Beach SAMP, and that's being run through Coastal Resource Management Council as well as URI. And this whole process is looking at all these decisions that we're talking about right now, the changes that we plan on seeing along the coast, and how to help guide communities to try to make the best and most educated decisions towards protecting, infrastructure and properties and even habitats. We talk. There's a lot of talk about homes and roads and everything else, but the other part too is that you have very important habitats that are being impacted, such as your coastal dunes along your coastal barriers along the shoreline there, your salt marshes, which in a lot of cases are being shown to sink and are showing subsidence and actually sinking, and also getting inundated with more and more water each and every time. It's really tough. We have coming up in another week, we're going to have one of our really huge king tides, which is a significant tide event where we actually will see, depending upon where you are, and almost anywhere coastal, you will see flooding. You'll see flooding on Atlantic Ave and in Squamicut. You'll see flooding in all these places that are really close to the water that don't normally flood, but because you have there's more water because of the tide, it gets it floods these areas there and whatnot. So there's a lot of things going on, and these are big decisions. These are costly decisions, not only for our towns and municipalities, but also for homeowners and businesses and whatnot. And the whole process, this whole SAMP process, is getting to the point of different ways of looking at this and bringing out more knowledge to all of us, to communities, to homeowners, to everyone, to help make the right decision or to help make an educated decision.
So most of the people who actually view this on the TV and see this show, the people would be most affected would be the people around the Stonington area, where you have all those little inlets and stuff, and then of course the entire coast with all the beaches in Rhode Island, Squamish, and then all the rest of the state beaches and all those communities. what what can people do? I mean, they have homes, some in many cases extremely expensive homes.
Yep.
Some of them have been around for, certainly in Musquamaca, for generations. In other cases, like Stonington Borough is pretty new in terms of its being restored and everything.
Yep.
So what are people supposed to do? Or, how do they,
I
what should they know? Let's get the accurate stuff, not the stuff that he might hear on the TV.
Yeah, I think the most important thing is to be educated about the changes that we're seeing along the coast, so that, these meetings, these SAMP meetings I'm talking about, whether or not you're a Rhode Island resident or you're someone from Stonington or whatnot, and it's open to everyone.
Right.
And there's the opportunity to learn really more about our coast and again, try to make the best decisions. These are hard. These are, and there's no right or wrong answer. I mean, we have regulations to help protect our coastline. So obviously you can't do stuff illegal along the coast, but you need to make the best decisions possible, and it's hard. And again, I can't underline that enough, is that as we see higher sea levels, as we see more intense coastal storms, we're going to see more damage along the coast. And again, a lot of times it comes down to a personal perspective, or it's a family decision or a business decision about what's the best option. If you look at Musquamaca since post Sandy, obviously Superstorm Sandy was a big event.
Yes.
And for an event that really hit a couple 100 miles south of us, it did a lot of damage here.
Yes.
And we're all very aware of that. And we're a couple years past it now, and it's still fresh in a lot of people's minds. But we've also, for the most part, kind of moved on.
Right.
And this is a problem with a lot of these storms: is you move on, you kind of forget about it. But we're still just as vulnerable. Yes, in a lot of cases, we've built houses up higher. So that's going to protect them a little bit more. But if your road gets flooded and you can't get to your house anyways, it doesn't matter how high you're really built up. So in some areas and some communities, these are the decisions they're going to have to make about, is it worth it? There may be a point where you can't get rescue vehicles down there because of the levels of, because basically the sea's inundating your property and your home and whatnot. So again, be educated, be vocal about it. You have to express, the fact that these changes are happening, and you have to look at what's best for you as an individual and you as a family, you as a business. But come to these events, come to these planning events. Again, it's hard. It really is hard. I mean, they a couple of years ago they put sand on Musquamaca State Beach, and it's moving.
Yeah.
Sand moves.
Yes.
So no matter if you're looking at a beach fill or beach nourishment project and you put sand back on the beach, again, it's a temporary thing because sand likes to move. It moves down the coast. In Rhode Island, especially from Watch Hill all the way to Point Judith and Narragansett, for the most part, the dominant movement of sand is from west to east, so from Watch Hill to Narragansett. And most of the time it's going that way. Every now and then, if you have a sou'easter or whatnot, another storm will push it back to the west, but for the most part, it's moving down the coast.
Right.
The problem that we created decades ago, and it's a problem in one sense, and it's also a very positive thing in another sense, is that we created breachways.
Right.
So these coastal ponds, which are a big part of South County in Rhode Island, historically, they would only get breached during a major storm. And they would stay open for a while or stay open for a long time, or they'd fill back in or whatnot. When we decided to actually make those permanent and make permanent breachways there, it was great for people who lived on the ponds, people who are out in the ocean who want to get in the ponds to go fishing. It definitely changed the diversity of animals in there. It made it from it brought more salt water in, so it got more saltwater animals that came in there and whatnot. You got eelgrass in there, which is a very important habitat and whatnot. But when you made that permanent, you made basically a permanent funnel. So now, as the sand is moving its way down the beach from west to east, it hits this breachway and gets sucked in there. And when it gets sucked in there, it fills in the ponds. The ponds aren't as deep as they used to be, and then you talk all about this dredging. And we talked before about they're looking again to do some more work in Little Narragansett Bay. Last winter they did some dredge work in Little Narragansett Bay. They're going to be following up with some more work this year. Dredging is is not a one-time thing.
Right.
You know, it's a constant. You're constantly trying to fight Mother Nature to try to get that sand out of the breachway so that people can access it. You know, some of these ponds like Ninigret are very shallow. Ninigret, Quanakatock, you know, it's very shallow. There's very shallow sections to get a boat in there. That's why, you know, the dredging is often seen as needed, because people want to be able to get in and out.
Sure.
But again, it's a hard decision, and because it's also a very costly decision.
Very costly.
We're talking millions of dollars, and you know, it's hard with budgets. You know, the money is oftentimes not there.
Right.
So you have to look at sometimes getting creative and how to keep this going. So these again are hard decisions, and you know, and again, when you start looking at the predictions, it only complicates matters worse to know that in a couple years, or not a couple years, in say 30 years, you're going to have another foot of sea level rise on top, another foot of water, you know, on every single tide. So on high tide, you know how high tide is, add a foot to that. What does that look like? You know, that's a big difference.
And there is ability to map that. So
Yes.
that's when you get educated. There are plenty of scientists who have been studying this stuff. Would you say that University of Rhode Island has become a major important research
definitely on the state level, URI, you know, CRMC, you know, definitely become really big leaders in terms of really trying to push a better understanding along the coast. There are some online tools right now. There's a tool called Storm Tools, where you can just Google Storm Tools, and you can actually see these maps you're talking about. So you can figure out exactly where you live. You can see what it looks like with a foot of sea level rise, 3 feet of sea level rise, you know, 5 feet of sea level rise, what it looks like after a storm, a big storm surge and whatnot. And those kind of tools are going to help you make the right, or hopefully help you make the right decision.
Sure.
You know, the decision is not to build a giant seawall. You know, that's what we did for a long time.
Yes.
And there are case studies around the country and around the world that just show that they really don't work. You know, they're huge costs and they don't work, and they usually cause further erosion on either side of those walls and whatnot. And especially for a coastal community, one of the worst things is to see our beaches disappear. We treasure our beaches. They're a huge economic engine, and you know, if we were to decide to put a giant seawall, that's not the right answer. You know, people come here because of our beaches, you know, and we want to preserve that as much as possible. That may mean that we have to get more sand on the beach, you know, and dredging may be part of that. In addition, you know, we had mentioned before too about salt marshes. Salt marshes are incredible habitats, and we are seeing, you know, basically those marshes actually drowning. We have, you know, because of sea level rise and whatnot, higher, and you know, these bigger tides and whatnot, it's flooding areas. Historically, when they put the ditches through there, it created higher spots, so it causes these pools, and you know, we've seen a lot of die-off of plants and whatnot in there that are so important to protecting it. It's not just the front side of that coastal barrier, that dune. It's also the back side. Right. Because maybe the storm's going to come through the front, but the water's going to come straight through the back. So you need that marshes, and again, marshes are important not only for a habitat and also a buffer and a buffer against storms, a filter, but they really help to protect the region. They're huge habitats. So you know, a lot of the fish that we enjoy, the shellfish that we enjoy, the crabs and whatnot, spend the early parts of their lives in the marshes too. So we don't, you know, everything's it's all connected. You know, and it makes, again, it makes a lot of these decisions even harder about priorities. But really what it comes down to is that each community needs to take this serious, and they need to start coming up with plans for the future. And it's going to be hard, because it's again, these are not easy decisions. Right.
If they were easy, we would be able to do that 1, 2, 3.
And just from a for a perspective piece of things. So you look at Little Narragansett Bay, Nappertree Point, beautiful area, you know.
Which is around Watch Hill for people who don't know.
Yes. Nappertree historically used to have houses on there. They got destroyed by the 38. It was decided that they never rebuild. Since the 38, Nappertree Point has moved. Scientists at URI have shown that Nappertree Point has moved 1 full width back, so to the north. Okay, just because of normal coastal erosion, you know, basically the normal processes of wind and waves and sand movement and whatnot. It's moving things back, usually it happens more during big storms and whatnot, but we've seen that. Sandy Point, which historically used to be connected to Nappertree Point, so Nappertree Point and Sandy Point used to kind of form like the crook, like Cape Cod, and that got ripped through during the 38 as well. And Sandy Point has been moving as well. Now, Napa Tree, as I said, moved, so it's 2015, I say 85 years, it's moved back one full width, all right? Sandy Point, in the last 25 years, has moved between 300 and 400 feet north. That's significant,
Wow.
that's really significant, and it really underscores the power of Mother Nature and coastal storms and water, water and wind and whatnot. And it's, so these are prime examples of areas that are, if you don't rebuild on, they're able to migrate back naturally.
Right.
Now, if you put some sort of permanent structure on there, it doesn't allow that beach or that barrier to move back like it normally would. So, again, really hard decisions, and the best thing to do is get educated about them. So.
And and this involves, of course, the politics of what should be done. So we've had the discussion before, because after Storm Sandy, which really wasn't a hurricane, and luckily in Rhode Island, didn't kill anybody, because most people don't live there year-round anyway. Came in the end of October, towards the end of hurricane season. So the question became, what should we do about rebuilding? And we did this documentary together. You were my guest, and we talked about, very much the same stuff that we're talking about now. And many of the business people said, "Oh, we're going to rebuild," and just as you said, people kind of have short-term memory. They go ahead and rebuild. Well, some people didn't rebuild. Right. They made that decision, and that documentary is going to be reshown, we believe, at the Custom House Maritime Museum sometime later this year. Not at the anniversary, the end of October, but sometime in maybe November or December. So we're working with the Custom House Maritime Museum to go ahead and set up a scheduling for that. But they talked about in the video things like, the Andrea Hotel, which is a landmark hotel, had been family owned and had been at the beach for decades. They decided not to rebuild. They made themselves a portable restaurant, and
they've been very successful. So, and these are the hard decisions, and they're not. A lot of it has to come down to the individual or the family or whatnot to say, okay, is it worth it? Is it worth it to try to hold back the ocean? And most of the times, if not all the time, the answer is no, right? But so the Andrea made that hard decision.
Yes.
And again, they've been very successful since they've done that. In addition, other businesses such as Sam's Snack Bar, which was wiped off
completely wiped out.
And they now have a mobile unit that they can park there, that when a storm comes, they can move it away, and all they have is their deck. So their only loss is really just that deck there. They can get out of town as soon, or at least get out of the vulnerable areas at the time. We may be seeing more of that, because that is a model that really makes a lot of sense in a very vulnerable community, and again, our beach will always be there. It's going to keep trying to move back, and we can try to hold it back as best we can, but like I said, the beach will survive long after, things that we build will, and we can, at this point, we can only take temporary measures, whether it's to, elevate our structures, so at least get them out of the flood zone, or to use different standards that that we would use in terms of attaching the home to the foundation. There was a home in Mesquamacut that washed right off its foundation. Making sure that you have your roof is tied in tight. All these things that they're going to help protect you and give you a little bit better of a chance.
Right.
But again, in the long term, ultimately, if you're looking seriously at 3 to 5 feet, 4 to 7 feet by 2100, that's going to change what our coastline looks like, and we have to be, like I said, most of us are not going to be around. My kids are, and I want them to still be able to enjoy the shoreline and whatnot. And these are the hard decisions that we need to make now. Like maybe it doesn't make sense to keep, to look at different roads, and maybe we abandon parts of the different roads. There's a lot of different decisions that can happen, but it's hard. These are really hard decisions.
And then the continuing controversy, certainly on Atlantic Avenue in Mesquamacut, is the issue of whether we should put in sewers or not. Is that something? No, it's gone nowhere in terms of the town council. In terms of, and in fact, some business, locally owned business that was on Atlantic Avenue, people who owned the Pleasant View, which is a hotel, they sold it because of the fact that the town council would not approve sewers down there at the beach. Would that have been what's the plus and minuses of putting something like sewers down there?
I mean, it's really tough because you don't want to put infrastructure anywhere near a coastal barrier because again, a big storm comes in, it's going to wipe that out and whatnot.
Right.
There is, the technology has definitely gotten better, so there are ways that you can kind of cut off the pieces of that and whatnot. But again, then you compare it to Sandy, that I think, if I remember correctly, I think statewide there were somewhere around 500 septic systems that were destroyed or,
Yes.
or really impacted by that. So the question is, what makes sense? Does it make more sense to put a sewer line down there, or does it make more sense to try to put these individual systems and whatnot? And obviously the town council has spoken. They said that at this point they're not going to go there. They don't want to bring it back up at this point. And that's their decision. This is a community decision. And obviously there are a lot of vocal people about pluses and minuses about whether this should happen or not. But this again is another question about what does our coast become. There are communities in Charlestown right now where they can't have septic systems, so they have a holding tank. So they have to get someone down there to actually pump out the holding tank. Is that sustainable? I don't know. That's another really good question. I mean, is that what we want to work towards? I'm not sure. That's not for me, that's not the ideal situation by any means, because again, now you have a big holding tank of raw sewage that again can get dislodged during a storm.
Absolutely.
So these are again a hard decision, but again, you have properties that have been there for decades and they've been in families for a while, and they just they'll hold on for the very end. We really haven't had a major storm. Sandy was bad,
right?
But
wasn't even a hurricane.
It could have been a lot worse. It really could have been a
Yes.
huge amount worse. We had 5 feet of surge. We had a lot of sand on the roads and whatnot, but it could have been a lot worse. And what does our community look like in the scenario of it's a lot worse storm? And we don't know. We don't really know. And we hope we don't have loss of lives during that time, but we don't know what we're going to come back to. And so it's, again, sewers versus non-sewers, it's a hard decision. I mean,
right.
We, at the time, our perspective from Save the Bay was that we felt that sewers were the best option down there, as long as there were several contingencies that we wanted to see, like stronger planning and zoning to make sure that, one of the arguments was like, well, that means you're going to get a large hotel down there and whatnot. Well, you don't need to.
Right.
Again, the community can decide what they want to have. It doesn't mean just because you put a sewer line in that you have to do that. The other thing is, like, potentially you could have a cutoff point where basically, so that if you did have sewers down there, and again, I'm talking just sewers down in the
Atlantic Avenue.
Not Atlantic Ave, no, because they weren't even talking about bringing it down Atlantic. They were talking about bringing it down on the western side of Winnapaug.
Okay.
So in that area there, because again, state regulations don't allow you to put infrastructure on a coastal barrier, which is basically Atlantic Ave.
Yes.
So again, some of those houses would be on their own. They would still have to put their own septic systems in there. But again, big decisions. It's gonna come back up again. There's no question about it. Very costly. It already has. The town's going through the comprehensive planning process right now, and that topic came up again. And not only that area, but also other areas looking for sewer expansions. So this is going to be a hot button topic for a long time. The best option, again, the community has to help decide that. The regulations will help steer it in one way or the other, but the community really has to decide what they're willing to invest in and whatnot. Because again, we're talking multi-millions of dollars. And again, it's tough. You have a septic system, put a septic system down by the beach. As the water gets higher, do you have the same amount of treatment under that? It's really tough conversation. So it begs the question: is like, should we be here?
Right.
And that's
a big question.
And again, that's a hard question to answer.
Right.
It's a really, really hard question to answer. And I'm not saying I have the answer to that. I just think that it comes down to the fact is that communities need to figure that out.
Well, one thing they finally did in Rhode Island, after having it on the books and then taking it off, is they've eliminated cesspools.
Yes.
Finally.
That was good.
That was some leadership in Providence. There is no more cesspools by the coast.
Yeah. Well, and two things. So, the Cesspool Phase-Out Act, the first part of it got passed back in 2007, and that was elimination of cesspools within 200 feet of any coastal feature. The newest cesspool bill that just passed this year, and that was with a lot of partners, the builders, DEM, Save the Bay, huge amount of partners, eliminates basically all cesspools within the state with a point of sale. So when you sell the home, that's when you would need to replace your cesspool, because as hopefully most people know, cesspools are nothing more than a hole in the ground.
Exactly, and leaching it out.
No treatment into groundwater and whatnot, and you know, and I still hear from people that say, I have a cesspool and it works fine. And I'm always like, well, describe work. You know, like, okay, yes, it will hold the sewage, but do you have any treatment? And like, well, you know, it holds it, so it's good, you know, so yes, this is a very, very big thing, especially, you know, 25,000 plus cesspools within the state. That's, you know, those are all contributing to the water quality of our local waters and our drinking water. You know, so getting those replaced finally is a huge step. You know, and all the partners involved should really be commended on that, because that was a really huge undertaking.
And again, like all these things, decisions, they're ultimately political.
Yes.
Because it has to pass the legislature, whether it be in Connecticut or Rhode Island. So yes, that's very important. The other thing that happened in 2010, of course, we had the big flooding.
Yes.
And as a result of that flooding, certain properties that were right on the Pawcatuck River were actually purchased by the town with government, with state and federal money.
I think they're still working on it.
Oh, they are.
They're still working on
They
that.
are still working. But it does set the precedent
Yes.
for thinking about some parts of the coastal area, that the next big one, which is ultimately going to happen, maybe it's time not to rebuild.
Yeah, and I think that's a huge decision, because you know, again, we're talking about, you know, in some cases a lot of hundreds of thousands of multi-million-dollar homes and whatnot, and how do you actually do that, you know? But a lot of that's going to be governed about where you can and cannot rebuild after once that next big storm comes, you know, but it does set a good potential precedents for the future about being able to think about that as an option.
Yes, it exists. It exists.
And I know that, you know, it was Governor Cuomo in New York had talked with several communities about doing the same thing. They had funds after Sandy to be able to purchase properties. I don't think as many people took advantage of it as he had hoped, but at least it's moving in the right direction. You know, and again, we're still vulnerable with floods too. You know, it's not just what's coming up the coast. You know, we're also the flooding issue is still really big. You know, down in this region, the Wood-Pawcatuck watershed drains a third of the state of Rhode Island and a smaller portion of Connecticut. It's a lot of water.
Oh yes, definitely.
You know, and it's definitely. It's still a lot of vulnerability along the edge of the shore bank, you know, and it's tough, you know. It's really, really tough, because as we get, again, more intense storms, so in this case it's not a coastal storm, it could be a coastal storm, but intense storms with rainfall amounts.
Yes.
You know, like, you know, we just finally got rain. Was last week?
Yes.
And it dropped 3 to 4 inches of rain. Not a small amount. 3 to 4 inches. That's a significant amount.
In a very, very short period of time.
Yeah, and we were basically we were in a drought up until that point, and we're still in a drought, even with 3 to 4 inches of rain. But you know, when that rain falls that quickly on really dry soils, it basically runs off, and you don't get. We're working on our garden this weekend, and it was super dry. It looked like we got no rain whatsoever.
That's right.
You know, and so. Again, these are all really, you know, we're getting hammered from every side, whether we're getting hammered from the coast or the rainfall events or the snowfall events we've had over the last couple of years. It's definitely been it's an interesting time, let's say that.
And the point, though, for people to get educated is that the presence of drought and then the presence of intense rain and the presence of hurricanes and other storms is all part of the same picture. You know, some people say, oh, we can't have climate change because we had big snow, right, this past winter, or hold on, we had all that snow, so that means your climate change stuff is wrong. No, that's the point. The point is that it's this intense kind of stuff. It's not necessarily that it has to be one thing or another. In fact, it's more likely to be this combination of drought and then intense rain and then coastal storms. It's all part of the same picture. And the rising water and the temperature and the water getting warmer. The potentially, I think, and of course I'm not a scientist, is that as the water gets warmer, the potential for more dangerous things like hurricanes intensifies.
Yes.
One of the reasons why you have more in the Caribbean and Florida is the water temperature is higher.
Exactly.
So as our water temperature, and it doesn't have to be 10 degrees, 1 or 2 or 3 degrees makes a huge difference. Not only because the sharks want to come up here, but so do the storms want to come up here.
And it's really extended the whole hurricane season too. I mean, a couple of years ago we had a storm in early December, which is
Unheard of.
So up until this point, it was totally completely unheard of. So, yeah, you're exactly right. There's definitely there's all these factors, and the whole idea of climate change. One of the negative things that first came out of it was when it was termed global warming.
Yes.
So everyone thought because global warming, it means everywhere is going to get warmer. Well, yes, some places get warmer, some places actually get colder.
Exactly.
And again, like our last couple winters were cold, but they had a lot of snow. We had a huge amount of snow. There's a lot of moisture in the air. So again, whether it's snow or rain or whatnot, these are some of the things that we should plan on seeing more often. And we just need to plan for that. So.
And I think that this may be in your mission, I don't know, but part of, I think, the kind of responsibility that Save the Bay can be is, in fact, going into public schools and getting public school kids educated properly.
Yes.
So that they might hear something on the TV or something their parents or grandparents might say, which is not true.
Right.
Not true. And you don't want Junior to interrupt Grandma, but at the same time, Grandma should not, or Mom or Dad should not be giving kids the wrong information.
Right.
And part of that is exactly what you're saying. People who want to deny what's going on often say, oh, well, it's only going to be hot. Now that we had snow all this winter, it means you're wrong.
Right.
No, not at all. And the other thing about people who seem not to have any understanding of science is that just because you make a educated guess today doesn't mean that you'll get more facts later and then you'll modify it.
And even the predictions that we heard several years ago about what we should expect by 2050 and 2100 have changed. Those numbers have gone up.
Right.
So you have to constantly be looking at the latest science to make sure that you are telling us the right story at the right time. And you said the piece about public education is definitely a big point. It's not just educating those the decision makers now, but it's those decision makers that will be there in the future. And a lot with our programs, we incorporate climate change into all of our conversation, whether or not we're teaching about an animal or about water quality or whatnot.
Right.
It's all tied in together. So it's not its own. It's a lot of times people like to put climate change in its own separate container, but it's really part of everything. You look at the droughts out in California. We're water rich out here, but we're in a drought.
Right.
So it can impact us as well. And so it's really impacting us. Really, not just nationwide, but all around the world. So.
And there's winners and losers in these kinds of things. So so the lobster fishermen of Rhode Island and Connecticut are suffering, and the people in Maine and Canada are doing well. The other issue, I think, which is a bigger issue, and that is, of course, the Arctic is getting warmer. So that opens the sea lanes for traveling perhaps 12 months a year.
Yep. Or if not 12 months, at least a good portion of that. And and again, there's been other sides saying, well, there's never been so much ice in the Arctic over the last couple of years. That's sea ice. Okay,
right.
That's not land ice. What we're worried about is the land ice, the stuff that's actually on the land, because as that melts, that gets into the water and that helps elevate the levels of it. Sea ice is just like an ice cube in a glass in a cup. If you have a couple ice cubes in this, when it melts, it's still the same level. It doesn't change because it's already in here. But if I were to make a slope of an ice cube and have it drip in there, it would add more. So that's the issue. It has more to do with the land ice than it does actually to do with the sea ice. So that's another argument.
No, because that's right, because people sort of lose kind of perspective. But it is true. It is true globally that there will be winners and losers. And there also is an issue, as you'll discover in California, this whole thing with drought has led the politics and the politicians to make some rather drastic decisions about the whole use of water. And then it gets into the issue, well, what about those kinds of things? Because I think maybe half of our produce comes from California. And so that gets to talk about the farmers. Well, are almond farmers who need a lot more water than some other kind of farmers, should there be less almond farmers? And is it the role of the government to make those decisions?
To make that decision,
Whereas
almond sales have always, for the last several years, been huge because everyone wants to eat healthy and whatnot. So these are hard.
Yes.
Again, everything's impacted by the changes that we see in the weather and along the coast and whatnot. So it's tough.
Yes, and if it was if it was easy, we would all get it down.
Yes.
But again, we live in more progressive places than some of the other parts of the country, which are all the politicians are climate deniers. I mean, luckily we have certainly in Connecticut and Rhode Island, elected officials,
good leaders,
who understand that this is going on, and particularly in Rhode Island, where the entire economy, well, that's not true of the entire economy, but certainly a lot of the economy is completely based on the fact that we are an ocean state.
Tourism's huge. It really is huge. So and that's really our economy in Rhode Island.
Right.
So we rely. So again, we had a great summer season, and that's great because based upon the weather and everything like that. But how will that change? How will that change with more water on our roads? Well, maybe people can't get down to the beach. All right. Well, maybe these are all the things we need to think about. So
absolutely. And the other kind of thing, they put up new dunes when Storm Sandy came through with Misquamicut. They didn't put any plants or anything. Do you know if it's in the place? Because they were talking about it for a couple of seasons now, but what they're going to do next.
And there were some very smart decisions. This summer they just reopened the town beach pavilion, which they actually moved back.
Yes.
So they made a good decision.
The town of Wesley's right. It's
which is a great decision. There was some dune grass planting there. The state beach decided not to do dune grass planting. There's different ideas about what's good or bad, in terms of dune grass planting. We've done a bunch of beach grass planting down in Newport as well, not just as in Westerly, because they have the same issues that happened over there as well. So in some cases, I think it's, again, at that point, it was a decision that the state made for the state beach, whereas the town beaches and the private landowners decided they wanted the beach grass back, and it does. So the beach grass, a well-established coastal dune with beach grass the beach grass helps to keep the sand in there.
Right.
I mean, what I had heard, one of the really interesting things about Sandy was the last time that the dune system was as destroyed as it was after Sandy was during the blizzard of '78. So it wasn't even a hurricane. So that shows that fact alone shows that basically dunes take a long time to build. That's 35 years from basically '78 to 2013. That's 35 years to build up a strong dune, and yet they still got destroyed.
Oh, completely.
But it could have been a lot worse if we didn't have them. And there's been perspectives about, well, maybe the road shouldn't have been plowed. Maybe we should have built the road up where the sand actually was when the sand washed over. Maybe the road should be built at that height, and that has its own issues and stuff. So these are decisions we need to not only plan for now, but we need to plan for the next post-storm, and we need to think about what are we going to do after, what are the decisions we want to make hereafter and stuff. So,
is the state then, to your knowledge, not going to put any grass?
I haven't heard anything.
Oh, interesting.
And it's actually coming back by itself.
Okay.
So it's
kind of ugly, but yes.
Yeah, it's kind of ugly. Yes.
Aesthetically, it looks a lot better with some grass on it.
It does, and that's.
But of course, the point is, if it didn't make any difference, then why spend the money and the effort to go ahead and do it? Right. I mean, the whole storm, the pavilion at Misquamicut Beach really was no major damage.
Yeah. Yep.
Because it was built later, '99, I guess it was, up to code, so
it was built up higher. Yeah, exactly. So they had damage to, it's more. It wasn't structural at all. It was more,
aesthetic kinds of
stuff.
Right. The playground was completely demolished and completely rebuilt. Yep. They did make some other changes about just access to the beach. They changed that instead of every 10 feet having an access. They made it much more,
and that's
much fewer, and that's good.
And that's really good.
Because in the sand, there's less places for the sand to go into. Right. So that stuff has all been done reasonably well.
Yep.
But the other big thing is behind the state beach is that marsh, which is got tons of not only sewer and all kinds of other crap, and it's just plain sand. And are we gonna dredge that? I mean, is that a good idea? Should we be doing it?
The marsh or the pond?
Yeah, the pond
The
behind.
pond, yeah. I mean, that's. I think that was just at the town council meeting last night. And so again, these are decisions that need to be made. What are the best ideas to do that? Definitely Winnipeg has some issues. Hasn't been dredged in a long time. There is no more of the historic eelgrass that used to live in there. So that changes obviously what can survive in there and whatnot. It's hard to access. Once you get past the initial part of the breachway, it's hard to access around the corner there. It's very shallow. So yeah, I think that again, these are decisions that don't just fall onto the state. They fall onto the towns too, and coming up with funding to do that is really tough. One of the successes that has happened in Charlestown is that Charlestown has been very proactive and has actually designated a fund to work towards coastal preservation, including dredging, and has actually been able to provide a match from the local level instead of relying on the state to come up with that funding. And I think that that's where we're going to see changes. We're going to see changes on the local level where the municipalities are going to need to take a bigger role in cost sharing a project. So if you have a multi-million-dollar project, you can't just expect the feds or the state to do it.
Right.
If the town is able to put some funding in that, or create a kitty like Charlestown does, like Westerly has done. Westerly just started that last year, I think. So the more opportunities to do that, the more likely these projects will go forward. But right now there's no money for this kind of stuff.
Right.
And it makes it really tough. So does it need to get dredged? Yes. What is the best way to go about that? That's up in the air right now.
Right.
It's definitely, I know in Winnipeg it's definitely an access issue. Getting in there is an access issue. There is a very large marsh there too, which needs protecting as well, because again, like we talked before, it's not just the coastal barriers in the front, but it's also the marshes in the back that provide such a great service to protecting the whole region. And really,
barriers.
Yeah, exactly. So
yes.
You need them there. And so having the sand wash over from Sandy or any other storm back in the marsh, that's actually a good thing, because that actually helps to build up the marsh elevation. Again, really hard decisions, really costly, multi-million-dollar projects, $1 million, $2 million, $2.5 million, $3 million projects where, that funding is just not available. So,
or maybe the decisions are not being made to get some funding. I think, sometimes it's just more trouble to go ahead and search and do this kind of stuff.
Sometimes, yes.
Sometimes it simply takes political will.
It does take, and again, that's why the cost sharing is such a big piece, because if you can show that you are invested at the town level, that this is not just something the state needs to do, you show that we need this because this helps our economy, for recreation, for boating, for restaurants, for businesses, for homes, or anything like that, and show that you actually have the means to provide some funding for that. That's how a lot of these projects are starting to go through now, because of that match.
Right. And for a different reason, the state of Connecticut, the governor has some kind of port authority he's created for the purposes for commerce to dredge their main ports, because the ships have gotten larger and larger. New London at one time actually had cruise ships coming. So to increase that likelihood, to get Bridgeport and New Haven back as locations where big cargo could be actually brought on back and forth. So there's some great economic reasons to start thinking about that. I mean, it's been narrow in terms of just looking at those port cities, but at least it's a start again from looking at other stuff.
But I think that's where you should look. Those port cities that are already pre-established, those are the places that have been historically dredged and that you want to look at again. You don't want to create new ports. Like a lot of time, it's better to actually take the resources that are already available, fix the infrastructure there, and allow them to come back in there. Because I mean, again, there's a potential for loss of habitat. Dredging projects can cause damage. And so in a lot of cases, it makes more sense to go in a place that has that already has been impacted. That's more of a commercial setting than
Yes,
whatnot.
so that's good management on the
Yeah.
part of the state of Connecticut.
And then also trying to figure out where you're going to what you're going to do with this material. So another issue is that when you have a area that needs to be dredged that has historic has historic businesses and whatnot that may have dumped or whatnot,
Right.
you have toxic sediments. You got to figure out where you can dump that. There is definitely an issue about where to, where the stuff should be disposed of. However, along the south coast, it's mostly sand. So sand is a resource, and we need that sand.
Right, they could have put it back on Ocean Beach. And
Well,
London.
whether or not you put it back on the beach or you put it back to help build up the marshes or whatnot,
Okay.
there's a lot of different options to do that. But sand is a resource, and we don't want to lose that.
Right, right. Well, it's been a pleasure as always to have you as my
Thank you.
guest. All right, so the big thing news for you guys in October and moving forward is those wonderful boat trips.
Yep.
And there's one right in Westerly.
Yep, there's one
right down on Margin Street.
On Margin Street
Right.
at Viking Marina. Yep, and you can just check out our website at savebay.org.
Right, remember it doesn't have the in it,
No,
Save
just
Bay.
Save Bay, no the.
Yes.
And click on the little seal picture, and
Okay.
it'll pull up all the dates and times, and you can make a reservation right online. There's a number 2 as well if you want to call that way. But they're a great trip. They're a great opportunity
Absolutely,
to get in the water.
I've been in one, and I'm going to go to another one.
Yep.
They're great opportunities to see all those beautiful seals.
Yes, yes.
Absolutely. And any other important things coming up that the public should be aware of? So these public meetings, people should keep abreast.
Yeah, just keep it. Yeah. Check out if you're interested more to find out about our coast and the changes that we're experiencing along our coast and some of the research that's going on. Check out beachsamp.org. You get more information there as well.
Right, that's wonderful. Great. It's wonderful to have you on
Thank
my
you very
show.
much.
And don't forget, we will be having a re-showing, a re-screening of my documentary Aftermath, which Dave was one of my guests on that show. And we talked about what happened with Storm Sandy, the destruction of our beautiful Musqueamica Beach, the economic implications of that destruction, as well as the kind of social kind of things that happen in a beach community. And we're going to re-show it. We probably will do it sometime later this year. And our host will be the Custom House Maritime Museum. They have been a guest on the show. And they are also this wonderful, small but beautiful historic custom house, which it really was, museum right there in downtown New London on Bank Street. Go and visit it. It's certainly worthwhile to take a trip there. And they also are the owners of 3 lighthouses in the area around New London. So keep that in mind. So give them a, you can look them up online also, Custom House Maritime Museum, Bank Street, New London. Catch out what they might be having. They have new exhibitions all the time. So again, thank you very much,
Thank
Dave.
you.
It's been an absolute pleasure
Same
to
here.
have you.
Same here.
And we do a little touring when we go and show my documentary. We are 1-2.
Yeah, we try.
A little
yeah.
tour we have.
Yeah.
So anyway, stick around, find out more about our documentary. We'll have more information as the details become known. So again, this is Harriet Grayson, your host and producer of Community Culture Showcase. Don't forget to tell your friends about us, and we are available to be seen on YouTube. So don't worry about checking us on the television anymore.